You can't keep using tools of oppression and expect to raise free people.
Another letter in support of people raising free people. Read by Itiel McVay of smellgoodspa.com.
Dear Limbo in Fight and Flight. The other day, my family and I went on an adventure across a 20-foot above-ground obstacle course. While waiting for our turn, we observed the small children and adults who ventured out before us. Although they all seemed to be getting through the course successfully, the concentrating eyes and clenched jaws were giving me pause. But it can't be that bad, right? The attendant said, "Next person." I go up the steps. She connects me to the safety rope and looks me in the eyes sternly. Once you begin this course, you have to finish it. 20 feet above ground doesn't sound too bad when you're on the ground. Once the course was over, as a family, we shared exactly how we felt about that adventure. My husband and older daughter and I all shared a similar perspective of overcoming the feeling of apprehension. Well, my younger daughter, we did not have to ask her about her perspective because we heard it. Everyone there heard it. My young lady snot-nose cried on the fourth obstacle. Do I blame her? Not at all. She physically displayed what we all were feeling. Although she was hesitant from the first step, never once did she say, "I can't do this. I don't want to do this. I'm turning back." I heard her crying behind me, and although I empathized with her, I would not default to the mommy is here mode. Why? Because I know my child. Her fight always wins out. And to be honest, she likes for me to just be there, not hover. I like that about my children. So there she was crying, yet each time I looked up, she was finished with one obstacle and on to the next. Her daddy was just heart-melting brilliant, encouraging her. The couple behind her were encouraging, and the 50-plus people waiting in line were cheering her on. They even clapped and congratulated her when she was finished. I did not hug her. I high-fived her and patted her on the shoulder and said, "You did good." She liked that. As we walked and talked, I said, "I bet if we come back next week, you'll be able to do that course again." She replied with a resounding, "Yup," back straight, no hesitation in her response, a determined look. We all have it. Fight and flight is within us all. You know that feeling, right? That inadequate feeling that's rising up throughout this deschooling journey. Flight tells you to stay in bed. No one is going to support this project. You failed. Why not give up? How dare you think you deserve to feel accomplished? Fight tells you to persevere. Get your butt out of bed, off the sofa, make some phone calls, stay present in what you want to accomplish. This project will get done. How are you going to get support if you don't do? How will you know if you don't try? So what, you failed, but did you learn? My daughter is a prime example of how, if you want it bad enough, if you want to overcome obstacles in the way, if you want to get down from a 20-foot obstacle course, you have got to let fight propel you forward. So many days I have felt the warm caress from flight. Fight reminds me that it's a trick and to revolt. Flight is indeed needed. It's there for a good reason, a very good reason. That reason? Danger. So if you're not in danger from your aspirations, don't rely on it. Instead, rely on the safety rope called fight. When those lack of fun situations arise, fight says, get a job. But fight reminds you of the wisdom to monetize on your skills and talents. So limbo in fight or flight, which do you choose today? Flight or fight?
Y'all have heard Itiel on this podcast a few times before, right? She is one of the primary members of my support circle. She's been in my life for a very long time. I think we started blogging maybe around the same time, many moons ago, when our daughters were littles. And she's a long time unschooler. their family. It's her husband, and their 2 daughters. And they've been unschooling for many, many years, almost 2 decades. And so it is just such an honor to have Itiel in the mix talking about some of the lessons that she learned along the way, that her partner learned along the way as they continued their deschooling process. And now they're raising adults. I think it is so dope that Itiel is who is reading the letter this week. I didn't even plan this bit of beautiful synergy. This week's episode is also from another longtime unschooler. Astarte, aka Jennifer, is our guest this week. And you're going to notice that I'm going to shut up for most of the conversation with Astarte because I met her daughter. So she has 2 biological daughters and then one other young lady that she considers a daughter who she raised for many years. So I met Coco, who I think may be Astarte's oldest. We met in Los Angeles, and she was talking about the ways that her mother went from homeschooling to unschooling way before anybody had even heard the term, back in a time when there was very little support for homeschooling, let alone unschooling, and how that really helped her get in touch with who she is. She's an adult now, Coco is. She's raising her own daughter, Nebula. And it's interesting. I love that name too. Every time I say the name, my shoulders shimmy a little bit. But when I first met Astarte, interestingly, this was back in 2011. Coco had just had Nebula. I didn't even meet Coco at the time. I think she was like upstairs nursing. And an old friend and I were hosting an event in the space where Astarte lived and worked. So it's just wonderful, unexpectedly, to happen upon her by meeting her daughter and then doing another get together later on in that week. And then Coco brought her mom, and I kept saying, why does she look so familiar? And then we finally realized, oh my God. So that's really wonderful. I'm looking forward to your feedback on this one because there's so much goodness in the mix. I mean, this whole thing could have been a Dare You letter all by itself, but Itiel blessed us with something short and deep and dope. All good stuff.
I am Jennifer Astarte Rising Lane. That whole thing is me. I grew up in Dallas, pretty much, and I had my girls there. And after talking and reflecting on my childhood there, just remembering what, like, at a certain point, elementary and then into middle school was like for me. And I had just so many amazing things. I had an amazing period in education as a student where I was offered so many great things. Art was a real class. I had violin, I had piano, I had ballet after my math class. You know, it was all very integrated and each one equally important. And as my kids started to grow, I started to notice that schools were being reduced in terms of quality of education. And I'm sure it started even before that, my realization of it, but having children of your own brings that realm into focus for you. By the time the girls were maybe 4 and 6, I left Dallas because I felt like this pool is too small for me to teach them, and I need to expand and get us to a broader world, into a world where there was more diversity and just an expansiveness. And so we ended up in New York via a relationship. That relationship was the catalyst for me being able to become a stay-at-home mom. And so it kind of started from there. And then getting my children into school, observing how the school system was running, and just realizing artistry, which is so vitally important. Every major era of life is marked by the artistry, if not spawned and sparked by the artistry of that era. we're creative people as just brown, black peoples. People of color are so artistic and creative. And not that my European family isn't, but that aspect of who we are, for that to be underfed, to be repressed, to be ignored and devalued, it's crucial. I know of a friend who dance was her genius, and she only excelled at everything else if dance was being fulfilled in her life when she was a young girl. You see, her kinesthetic intelligence was tapped through the dance. It was the gateway to all of her other learning. Yeah. Because when you think about dance and music and the mathematics that's even inside of that, that genius being shut off for her was like blinding her. Seeing that began to disappear, along with things like the wood shop and everyone being relegated to pen and paper, and that's it. There's nowhere for them to channel or sublimate, especially when they hit the pubescent age. There's nothing expressive to channel that outside of maybe sports. And then over the years, you start to see how phys ed is just vanishing from school. Physical education for me was a full-blown experience. Baseball, basketball, volleyball. I was a cheerleader. I did so many things. I just observing the system, observing the environment, observing the social behaviors, the habits, trying private school, realizing that they had only put on uniforms and still followed the same template for how we educate children. People think that it's about, oh, we're going to teach you, which is to put into you. But really the objective should be to educate you, which is to help unlock and bring forward what's already there. That became a daily study for me for a while before homeschooling. But I think what I told you, I heard a voice say to me, I am their guide. And that understanding did not forego that I create the boundaries, that I'm the eldership, that there's this respect that must be in place. But it made me very aware of the fact that I'm not just here to claim them as my property, to feed them, clothe them, to house them spiritually. I'm these beings' guide. In the moment, I wasn't considering how unorthodox my moves were. I knew it was off the beaten path, but I really was just in my feelings and my intuition around what needed to happen. And hearing the voice explain you are their guide, and understanding and comprehending that, and then realizing this is a huge responsibility, not just that from this place of maternal giving birth, but on a spiritual level where we are spirits having a human experience, and I'm their guide until they can fly on their own. And I need to move out of the way my stuff as much as I can. My misperceptions.
That's where you're going to lose a lot of people. And this is where I'm really glad that we can have this dialogue out loud, because I know I've certainly experienced, and I imagine that you have as well, folks who will say, yes, I agree with you. I absolutely am my children's guide, which is why I need to have more control, which is why I need to make decisions on their behalf. What is it you think in you? What is it that you know or feel that says, actually, no, it does not mean that I come from a space of more control. The term you used was get out of the way. That's exactly how I've experienced it. But why? Why is that so tough for us, you think?
Well, what I realized is that we are products of those who came before us. My mom did, my dad, their parents, these traditions and habits and ideologies and belief systems, we're a big ball of stuff. I understand that. And I have my stuff that it would come up and then I would have to realign myself and things like that. And so there was a respect that I became very aware of, even though they were children. And
a respect for them. That's what
for
you're saying.
them, yes, that they deserve respect. These little beings, they're so much more ancient than you realize. And we bring them into this world. We dump them down with our oppressive machinations around being a parent, rearing, controlling, and those kinds of things get in the way. They really do, of having a deeper experience with them, because the only way you know the best way to raise your children is if you can listen to them, whatever their age is.
Did y'all hear that? Right? Because nothing else is partnership-based. Nothing else is respect-based. So yes, you are the guide. Being an unschooler or self-directed or any of these terms that we connect to does not take away parenting, does not take away the sense of the fact that I am responsible for your physical body as you are learning how to navigate and own it. Like, none of those things are taken away. However, with respect in the mix, you're still talking about a level of bodily autonomy. You're still talking about consent. You're still using the term respect because they are their own people with their own ecology, and you are a guide.
Because my girls were very different. Because they were both Scorpios and two sides of the exact same coin, I had to use astrology to understand them. One needed things that the other one didn't. If I did a blanket kind of raising and rearing, it would be a disservice. My relationship with them would suffer. If you don't have respect and you don't have a capacity to really hear them and listen, your relationship doesn't develop. It stumps it. And they're growing so rapidly once you bring them into the world. They're changing so much that from 1 month to the next, if you're not present, if you're not listening, you wake up and they're a totally different person. You don't even know who they are.
That's actually far more common. The mother-daughter womb space is far more common than the mother-daughter having healthy relationships, because there's so much pretending and not knowing, and generational trauma and not having tools and not having time and space that cause us to just do the same thing. And that's why it's so powerful to me, because you've raised 3 adult daughters right now. They're 3 grown women. And having talked to 2 of them and seeing how y'all move about each other, and with your grandchildren in the mix, it was just like really wonderful. Not in a way that I'm romanticizing, but I'm telling you from being around it in so many different instances, it was just so important to me that you get to talk to us, because you're living the experience on a much further out space in the journey than a lot of us, because you raise 3 women. You have real relationships.
Yeah, you have to really, I didn't want to miss out on anything, I didn't want to miss out. Not only that, if I can't get them to talk to me or feel like I'm approachable and realize that I'm here and I'm listening, I don't know what's happening. I'm not the confidant anymore. Too many of the children are trying to inform each other about stuff that they don't know anything about because we're not talking. And I know that life is hard. I had a few years of being a stay-home mom and homeschooling, and then I had to go back to work. And I was lucky enough that the girls had owned it. They had taken responsibility for their homeschooling experience to continue that while I went out and I worked. That was a hard period. I struggled. But when I pulled them out of the schools, like, my major fear was that on a spiritual, like, subconscious tip, my kids were with other people all day. They could impress upon their little young minds, program into, persuade, influence, anything. anything. That
Yes.
that was more power than what I had.
And what they had, because if they're so
Yeah.
busy with everybody else, that like, where are they in the mix?
Right.
Yes.
And that frightened me. It's like, oh my God, this person is with my kid all day and they have all this time of influence. And then I give them a night to feed them, clothe them, try to have an exchange, and then off to bed and up the next day. And that's what frightened me the most. It wasn't about making them a better student at math. Like, honestly, it wasn't about making them a better this or that in terms of academia. It was, I need these children to be the best human beings that they could possibly be. Everything else will fall in place. And what doesn't won't be needed. Because I didn't have a template at that time for anything that I was doing. It was an adventure. There was this freedom. It was a whiteboard that we could draw anything into. And so I just did it. Like I told you, my younger daughter, she had this sweet little Jewish school teacher who was like, I can't even attend to your child. She's so quiet and well-behaved. I forget she's here because I'm busy doing crowd control. And I mentioned, well, I'm thinking about homeschooling. She said, if you are, do it. And the very next day, I pulled them out. I pulled out Winnie first. I pulled Winnie out. And Winnie has never been a extroverted child. She's always been very quiet, very introverted. She never wanted to leave home for anything. And then the other girls were like, well, we want to do homeschool too. So I was like, we're going to do this. We're doing this. We're doing this. So I bought my books. I got my chalkboard. We're down for breakfast, right? Because at that time, I was the apron-wearing, cookie-baking mama. I was ready to go, all reared up to go. And for days, they would just lollygag and roll their eyes, up in their heads, and they didn't want to focus, and they just weren't into it. They were just being excited about the fact that they didn't have to go to school anymore.
Because freedom feels good.
Freedom feels good, because make no mistake, the institution known as the schools and the places of higher education are many prisons, and they are centers of deep-seated programming.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. And then they feed into the other literal prisons.
Oh, yeah.
And the figurative prisons. And
yes. Which is the scariest one to me. The ones that are penetrating the subconscious when you don't even know. They're splintering the spirit on levels that you're not even aware of.
So that it's really easy to perpetuate because there is an awareness.
Right.
Yes.
At a certain point, I just said, okay, well, I guess we're not doing school. I had bought McGraw-Hill books. Love me some McGraw-Hill.
Let it. My daughters are like, shut that down, Ma.
They were just like, I said, okay, it's not happening. What do I do?
You followed their lead, right? Because a part of being a guide is to know when to fall back. That is a part of guidance, y'all. That is you being a guide, because that's intuition and you responding to that.
Right, because I didn't bring them home to now become the person with the ruler. I didn't bring them home to imprison them and place them into another environment of rigidity and limitation. And so although I had no blueprint and I didn't know where we were going, and I was obviously the guide, the leader, I had to allow the experience to unfold. And so after a period of maybe a couple of weeks, it wasn't months, it was with them, it was maybe a couple of weeks of violent, having fun, chillaxing. Hell, we get up, go to the beach. Nature is your greatest teacher. We packing up, going to the beach. And so then there came this awareness that for them, we should be growing. And so then they started to engage it. And we went down a couple of different roads with a couple of different educational programs. I told you I bought VHS tapes because it was a whole homeschool program. You could put them in front of the TV with the VHS and they're viewing a classroom while having class,
Yes.
I did a couple of different things. And I just allowed for whatever. You know?
And that's what Coco said. She said, because I like to make that distinction, like it's self-directed when there is no consequence if they want to stop.
Yeah.
It's okay to introduce things. And she said that's how it was. My mom was like, okay. And it never felt like, she said it made them feel like, wait, are we tripping? And sometimes it'll be like, we are. And other times it's like, no, we're good. And that's what kept her inspired to learn and to look at learning in different ways.
Yeah. Especially for her, like, she would just dive into her books and very studious. And I didn't do that. She did that. She created that, developed that. And I just wanted my children to be just the best human beings. Like, honestly, I just wanted them to be the best human beings. Like, I aspire to be them right now. They're like, that's how I feel about it. They don't even know how much I worship these goddesses. They have no idea. And I feel lucky to have been able to fearlessly follow the intuition to just do it. And I can definitely accredit my partner with a great portion of that because he earned well enough for us to live in ease. And I got that opportunity. And I know it's difficult when you're working and they're small.
Yes.
You know, once they become teenagers and you've established a flow, then they can begin to take on more responsibility of it, or for it rather. But I know it's not completely easy doing what we're doing as parents out in this post-matriarchal world. Because under matriarchy, we had the village. We all breastfed each other's babies. We all supported and created that environment, and you didn't have to do it alone. Now we're in houses alone as single mothers, single dads out there, and even with a two-parent household. Like, I hate the programming of the idea that, our children are in a state because of single-parent households. No, that's not it. I hate that. It's bigger than that. That
gets me too. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And there's a systemic element that is very much in place that we ignore completely and make it about people not staying together. And this is why I'm constantly so encouraged by the community efforts, because there are a lot of us as women of color, as Indigenous women, Black women, who are getting back to that, doing things like breastfeeding in communal spaces, starting our own collectives, where we can do this in community, because that's how we have to reframe it now. Like, hey, we lost that along the way, but here's how we get this back together. We don't need to have a school first. It could just be 7 of us getting together in the mornings, and that's
and supporting. Yeah, we really do need each other. I tell you, when Coco had Nebula, Nebby had a household of like 7 people at all times catering to her. You couldn't tell her she wasn't like the star of our whole galaxy. So that was major. And then as we became just this tribe of women once again, because relationships, they come and they go, they ebb and flow.
Yes.
It's taken like the 3 of us to rear this child. You know, okay, if you're superwoman, you're doing it by yourself, or you're the superwoman with the husband and you're going to school and you got 5 degrees and you planting squash and you cooking from scratch and wonderful. However, we don't need to be superwoman. I even saw a presentation of how that's killing us, especially this Black woman superwoman kind of thing, where there's this expectation for us to be.
It's not so super at all.
Yeah, it's not healthy.
Right. And
it wears you down.
That.
Oh, yeah.
And we don't get to be ourselves. Exactly. No self-care in the mix. We laugh at that.
Oh, no.
Yes. Oh, yes.
No
I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah, that's a major element that as women, we can't help it because of how we live. We lose our identities utterly in our quest to nurture our men, to nurture the children, to nurture the grandparents, to nurture the siblings, to nurture the community. we're constantly in a state of nurturing, and it depletes. You get lost. If we had each other, then there would be more space and time for me to be just the woman.
Or whatever it is that I am or am not.
Yeah, to just be me.
Yeah, and this is what, for me, my daughters are just 14 and 12, but unschooling for us has been very much the portal to everything that you and I talked about here and what we talked about before.
Yeah.
Even what we talked about years ago when we met, because that was very much a space about self-nurturing and relationships with the physical body and subtle body as well. For me, mothering has been also how I've learned to mother myself. Also how I've learned to have a different level of respect and regard from my mother, because she and I grew up together, as she will say. There are just certain things now that, because I identify as an unschooler, I have the freedom to define these things on my own and to make decisions and reinforce it and realize, I know everybody thinks this is radical, but for me, this is how I thrive. Like, I don't even see it as, because what other choice do I have? You know, the other choice would be to surrender my children to the system every day. And obviously that's not something I had to figure out, and Chris and I had to figure out what life needed to look like, because that was not an option.
Right. That's how I felt like it was no longer an option, and it became a major priority. It became an emergency, honestly.
Exactly.
Yeah, it became an emergency. And so my thinking was, I can't do any worse than the public school system. I can't do any worse than the public school system. So as other parents would find out that I was homeschooling, they would say, well, what about their social skills? Right? We talked about this. What about their social skills? And after hearing it over and over and over again, I realized it's what's called an egregor. It is a spirit form that has been created for the group think. That spirit ruled how the group think processed, how it recognized. I was listening to, what is his name? I can't remember. It'll come to me. He said the other day, we're always dealing with the injustice of the system, of this matrix that we're living in, and the struggles and the dysfunctions and just all of these different elements that are not enhancing life, but inhibiting life. It's digressing us in so many ways. And people will still say the solution is a good education. They will still say, go get a good education. But if you're always saying that the man is the problem and the man holds you down and the system holds you down and that's why you can't get ahead, then why would you continuously think that the answer is to go to his institutions of education and get an education? Why would you think that that's the answer? It's not designed for you to evolve.
Right. It's not broken. Yeah. It works. That's its job.
That's its job.
Have us feeling like we couldn't possibly be enough individually, collectively, no matter how many letters are after our name. We're always, the more we do that, the more we are seeking external validation, which then drowns out our intuition, which makes us food for the system.
That drowning out your own inner guidance, your own inner tutor, it's so important. It's so important to get back to yourself. Like, what is your mind? Yes. Like, who are you? Which voice is talking in your head when you're deciding which ideology to follow at any given time? I feel like on a daily basis, I used to feel like daily. Now I feel it's several times during the day where I have to decide to take the red pill or the blue pill.
Yes.
Fully deciding to fool my children was a red pill, blue pill moment. I decided to go the opposite way. They are no worse for it. They are just fantastic and beautiful.
I could not agree more.
You know.
And so are you. I mean, you know, because
thank you.
All the time I say motherhood raised me, and obviously you had the type of relationship and are still nurturing the type of relationship with your daughters where there's like you're raising each other. You know, there's guidance. But now, as you said, it's like they don't even know. how much is going on, right? Yeah.
They don't even know how much I just like worship their asses. They have no idea. Like truly. And my younger daughter has always been my mother. I know in a past life she was my mom. And she was just always very wise when she was little. And if I were too busy being the authority, I would have missed out on her moments of wisdom. And because she was so quiet, like silence was a superpower for her. And in raising them, Coco was very externalized and extroverted. Winnie was very internalized and introverted. Coco learned through experience of the world. Winnie learned through observation of the world. Those dynamics, like these two little galaxies in my realm, you have to take time and space to behold that and then know how to guide that along.
Exactly, which is why I love how you said early on, the only way that you can know how to raise them is to listen.
Yeah.
That's it. Like you do not have to have it figured out. You do not.
No.
You did not read the right book or whatever. If you are present, if you know how to witness, a lot of times for me, I know how to even slow down my work so I could be available. Like I'm not even talking to the girls. I just know intuitively when I need to make sure my door is open, like my room door. I like to be in my room.
Yeah.
And as a writer, it's really easy for me to be like, just locked away. But I know when I have to open the door or go into their room and be like, you good? Just like physically make sure that they're seeing my presence, because sometimes that is their indicator to know, oh, I could come talk to mom about this, or I could invite her into my space. Like if you're too busy, like scheduling the curriculum or researching this or going to that conference or whatever, you will not know how to dance together, how to be in rhythm together.
Right. To be present for the moment where they come and they reveal something important. It was important for me, for my girls to know that when they decided to have sex, that they came and told me. I didn't find out, that we were prepared, that I had armed them, because contrary to popular socialization, the girls make the decisions about the sex. They decide when that's going down. So
people aren't ready for that one. People are,
no. The boys are not victimizing. The girls are deciding when that is going down. And
we forget about that dynamic, and it's very disempowering to girls for us to put the focus in that direction, because we're not talking about trauma. We're not talking about non-consensual experiences. We're talking about the reality that many girls are making the decisions, and many boys are experiencing the pressure and all of these things.
The boys are going to follow whatever the girls want them to do. Okay. And so I just needed to make sure that I had filled them with as much guidance and information that I possibly could. I had to demystify sexuality and other things so that they didn't run amok. They didn't run out to go and try to figure it out. I needed to get them into young adulthood in a state where what was really important to me is to empower them, to give them everything that I possibly could, because I knew that when they turned 18, I wanted to be able to hand over their adulthood. I don't want to still be raising kids. That's what was in my mind. I have no desire to still try and choose your friends for you. And you're 18 now.
Oh my gosh, Astarte, we could talk for hours, because this is the part that gets tricky for people, where it's like, well, if you're not prepared yet, if you're not available yet, if you haven't had the life experience and the context yet, then I need to make the decision for you. No, then you'll be doing that their whole life. And then when you're not doing it, they'll just replace your authority with somebody else.
Definitely.
So we have to practice.
Yeah, I'm telling you, talking about it openly, freely, totally demystified it, so my girls didn't run out, sneak out, or get lured out to do anything. I would talk to them to the place where they would be like, okay, Ma, we got it.
Right, like, oh my God, yes.
We got it. And people don't understand, because sex education is vital. And the ability to properly reason and choose when you enter into the realm of, am I doing it or am I not doing it, is you can get in the guidance. Don't think that you're going to leave it. Like, get your guidance in now. I think the first educational talk around sex I had with the girls were 10 and 12. This is what happened, okay? My mom didn't give me a sex education. She said, keep your dress towel down and your legs closed. That's what she got. I knew that that wasn't the key. So my girlfriend's moms, she would talk about sexuality like it was in the air at all times. Like, you look out into the world, she say, and the birds are doing it. You know, every living creature is engaged in sex every second of every day. And it just kind of opened, it peeled my cat back. Right?
I bet.
She is where I got my component. And let me tell you, people will come along with a gnosis, and that will add to your educational process with their children.
Exactly. Of course, because they come with their own ecology. So they're drawing what they need, and they're going to draw it from everywhere. You are not the source.
Yeah.
One thing. Yep.
Somebody else will come along with a knowledge or wisdom, or they'll give it to you. And my girlfriend's mom, this particular girlfriend, her gnosis to me that I implemented into my educating the girls was sexuality. And she was just so open, just uninhibited. And I was like, wow, I've got to run home and talk to my girls about sex. Literally. So the next day, once Spirit shows me what it is, I'm activating it.
And that's a big part of the work, right? Like not sitting in the doubt, knowing what you know. Yeah.
Spirit said, you're the guy, get them out of school, activate. And so I set them down. They were like 10 and 12. And Coco says, yeah, Mom, we know what sex is. We can hear you and my ex down the hallway.
Oh, my God.
Bumping and grinding. I was just like.
Were you ready for that conversation?
I was stunned. I was speechless. I was like, okay. You are aware. You know what's going. They know you're doing it. So you're not educating them. You're not talking to them. You're not open or approachable about that aspect of their schooling. That's a problem. But her.
Yes, and they're going to see you through that lens too. Like, whoa, I know. And
that you're lying.
Yes.
Yeah, that you're lying. They can sniff out a lie. They can sniff out bull. And so that conversation, that initiation, let me know, yes, this is the right time. My child is expressing verbally, very clearly, let's do this. And just over the years, the educating of your children from this unschooling, feral, wild perspective, it's the greatest adventure. It really, really is. I swear to God. It was a great adventure for me. How we unlock ourselves, how we unlock these little people. There's no set road. There really aren't any set rules. There's what society has set up for you. There's what you've been told and what you've been taught. Going to school to get a good education, to get the good job, is an old paradigm. You can't keep doing the same thing expecting different results. It's called insanity. You don't need to be afraid. Like, you love your babies, you love your children, you're their greatest guide, they trust you more than anyone else. You can do this. We can do this. I didn't have a bachelor's, master's. I didn't do a lot of reading. I did some investigation, other little things Spirit brought along the way, other people, other teachers, others, words of wisdom, gurus along the route. As you walk it and you trust in it, things will unfold for you. And it's not always easy because we still have this machine we have to deal with. It robs us of our time and our energy that we could be giving to the children, not living communally, things like that. But you could totally do it.
This podcast, by the way, is supported by brilliant, liberation-minded people over at patreon.com/Akilah. I want to shout out our newest patrons, Jonathan, Jennifer, and Ian. Welcome to the Fear of the Free Child Patreon community. And if you, yes, you listening right now, are getting all kinds of goodness and perspectives, head over to patreon.com, patreon.com/Akilah, AKILAH, and support the show for as little as $1 a month. Thank you.
Fear of the Free Child is a weekly podcast that centers
diverse narratives, insightful commentary,
learning with our children and deschooling ourselves,
owning our multiple identities and treating children with dignity,
creating community and sharing conversation from often silenced spaces,
breathing life into liberation practices proactively and on purpose.
It's about parenting. It's about self-directed education, loving. It's about learning.